Hello folks and welcome to the show here on this Thursday with myself, Shane Stapleton, and obviously Michael Verney here as well. We're brought to you by ourstore.ie this time. We've launched the new store here, so have a look here. Any amount of stuff on the store there. Get all your little handy Christmas presents, the whole lot. We've got any amount of stuff here at ourstore.ie. So if you do enjoy the channel and you want to support us, no better place to go, Michael Verney. Stuff from all counties.
No better places, right? Some lovely teas in there. There's a lovely Cyril Farr mug that I'm a big fan of that I have in my own kitchen here. Some lovely items in there, and all the different county stuff as well. And a lovely little mug with the great Brian Whelan on it as well.
Yeah, so go to ourstore.ie. There's loads of stuff there. We have plenty of stuff going on in the GA world this weekend as well, don't we?
We do. Jeez, there's so many things going on, and when you get down through even some great stories in the intermediate and junior championships as well. But obviously, probably the starting point is the defending All-Ireland Hurling Club champions back out this weekend. I think they're eight weeks off. They managed that gap pretty well last year, and they're coming up against a Kilruan McDonough's side who I know have been enjoying their week. And even there was a lovely kind of a moment or an occasion on, I think it was Monday evening, where a bus came down to Clough-Jordan from Clonoulty, with Declan Ryan was the main one driving it, I think, and a lot of Clonoulty players, and even saw Craig Morgan wearing a Clonoulty top. And it's just amazing how those two clubs have bonded. They've bonded probably so much in grief, I suppose, in memory of Dylan Quirk. And it was, I obviously wasn't on Monday's show, but it was just lovely the thing that Liam O'Kelly did with the red helmet symbolising Dylan Quirk and where he passed and everything, and just how I found it kind of amazing, really, how not grounded wouldn't be the word, but how they were able to do that in the heat of the moment, 5 or 10 minutes after a county final, when you're basically turned into a stark raving lunatic after, a big famine after ending. And it just shows you how much of a purpose that they must have felt they had. Or, and I know he talked after the drawn final about, it was asked about, did they miss their chance? And they were able to see a bigger perspective and a bigger kind of an overview of the thing, given things that had happened in games that they were involved in earlier on this year. But it's going to be fascinating to see how they react to, realistically, are they getting back in the pitch? I doubt they were back in the pitch last night. Maybe they're back in the pitch tonight, tomorrow night before Sunday.
I would have thought that they might have tried to do something on Tuesday evening. Now, maybe that's been a bit optimistic. At least a recovery session, as in get into a pool or something like that. I'm not entirely sure what they have there locally in Kilruan, but maybe something like that, because they'll have to blow out the dirty petrol, because you need one session to get out the dirty petrol and then another one to get going again. I don't think it's impossible for them to be right for this game on Sunday. You've done that before. Well, obviously you don't drink, but you'd have a big match and then you have to be right for the next Sunday. So I always think 2015, that first county title with Coola, and we went and had 2 hard days of it. I remember the shoot is going up talking to Matty Kenny saying, look, I know you don't want us to go for day 2 here, but it is going to be happening. And ultimately we did do day 2. Then we had that blowout session, recovery session on day 3, training fully on Thursday, or, tuning up for Sunday. And then we were grand for the match and went out and played very well. So I think it can be done for sure.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to your interview with Desi Hutchinson, and I thought it was very interesting that he basically bemoaned the fact that they did not celebrate their league final success, and basically said that by the time they got to the championship, they felt whacked, essentially. You have to, it's a county final. You go and celebrate. And, I think lads know themselves. Probably, I'd say they definitely had 2 good nights, at least. It'd be interesting to see, if you're saying about, a recovery session, a recovery session in a pool somewhere where there's 100 bottles of Heineken or Bud lying around the outside in a big bucket or something like that, and they can have a few bottles maybe and be relaxed about it. But I'll never forget Sir Kieran winning the 1998 Offaly Senior Hurling Final replay on a Saturday and celebrating it pretty hard. But they play Kiltegan the next day in the first round of Leinster, and they went and beat them. And it's it can be done. There's a balance there between the exertions and how much that takes out of you, and the momentum of, we almost feel a bit invincible here after winning the county title. And they were brilliant in that second half. They were absolutely outstanding in the second half, came out a completely different team. Now, the caveat of them coming up against a completely different animal on Sunday, like, that's the elephant in the room. They're not meeting some Joe Average side. They're meeting a team at their peak who have only one thing in their head this year, even though they won't say it, and that's doing back-to-back All-Irelands.
Okay, well, look, in a way, Kildangan plays similar hurling to Ballygunner. Now, I'm not saying they're on the same level, evidently not. And of course, Adrian McGrath, one of our regular viewers, wasn't long in slating me the other day when Kildangan lost, because I had said, well, maybe they're up in the top sides in Ireland because they've been so consistent and tipped the last few years. So he was quick in. But like, would you accept that to some degree we didn't really see it the other day, but they are a team that like to move it through the lines, generally try and keep two inside, have that bit of quality all over the field. It didn't happen for them, but it's not like Killarwan will come up against the type of hurling they've never seen before.
Yeah, similar kind of style. Similar enough kind of profile physically, I'd say, as well. Like, they're not, like, you'd say Ballygunner probably aren't the most physically imposing style. They impose their game on the match, but maybe they're not the most physically imposing team. They're just so fit, so organised, use the ball so well, create so much space inside for their danger men. They can hurt you from outside as well. So, yeah, listen, I don't think they're jumping in against into a completely different world on Sunday. I'll put it that way. But there are a couple of things to it as well, Shane. I think somehow, again, Ballygunner, after getting another home game, whether it's Fratterfield or Walsh Park, they've played some amount of Munster Club Championship games on home soil. That probably doesn't make it. That is another little percent maybe going against Kilruane. But there's definitely, and I know you'll go into it a bit more here, there's definitely some interesting matchups looking at the game, and maybe some potential areas where they could get some joy.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the matchups here, and I'm only trying to figure out who I think will mark who as we're going along here. And look, obviously this isn't an exact science. I'm just kind of trying to guess, will Cian O'Kelly be playing? He obviously didn't even do the warm-up on Sunday because of his ankle. Will Seamus Hennessy, who have wearing number 5 there but could be wearing number 13, will he start there? Will Niall O'Mara be okay? Obviously, it is hamstring bandaged up midway through the game. Jack Peters, he's been carrying a hamstring injury, and he was furious when he was brought off the other day. Hopped his helmet off the ground. And then I'm wondering, the obvious matchup, the first matchup you have to talk about is who goes on Desi Hutchinson. And if Craig Morgan was playing, he'd be the guy you'd say would go on him. I presume you'd agree with that. And because of how Aaron Morgan has been playing since he was moved back down the field, I'd be surprised if it wasn't him. Because, again, Jack Peters, he's had that hamstring issue, and I don't think he moves across the turf as quickly as Aaron Morgan anyway. Now, maybe you could look at Hogan or Cleary. I think maybe they'd be a matchup for Fitzgerald or Hutchinson. But to me, the number one matchup you look for is how do we stop Desi Hutchinson if he can be stopped at all? And I think Aaron Morgan, to me, is the most likely. And after that, if you can have Niall O'Mara, hopefully he's good to go. Maybe him up against Pádraig Mahoney. Maybe Killarwan feel that they can get some bit of joy there. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think Aaron Morgan has that type of profile that could, it's going to be very difficult to stop Desi, but to minimize the damage, I suppose. He's quick, he's nimble, he's good on the ball.
Good anticipation.
Good anticipation as well. And like when you're marking Desi, it's one thing, having the speed to match him. It's another thing. I'll put it this way, Shane. If I always think it's gas in training. You could have, just say, you'd have me and you running together, we'll say beside each other, and you might have two young lads beside each other. And like if we're running to 50 meters, like you're not that fast. I'm not that fast. No, all right.
I burn you.
If we go to 50 meters, the two boys are going to dust us. There's no point in saying any difference. But if you throw a ball in there and it's an anticipation of when the delivery is coming, the cuter head, and Aaron Morgan is only a young fella, obviously, but he does have very good anticipation kind of skills. Like there's a fella hurled with Burr, Brian Hennessy. He used to win all the sprints, and he was not the fastest, but he used to anticipate the whistle brilliantly.
Yeah.
But the anticipation skills is very important, particularly when you're marking someone like Desi. Like you're not good. There's no one probably faster than him in the country, realistically, former professional soccer player. But if you can at least anticipate and get that yard and at least not be on the back foot, you have some sort of a hope. And I think Niall O'Mara probably sitting back. I think like the idea of him going forward against Ballygunner is going to be unlikely, I would say, or less likely. And he's going to have to play more a defensive role if he's going to be there, because they're going to be trying to defend, particularly what's inside in that dangerous inside line.
Yeah, I've heard it said about certain soccer players who aren't the paciest but always get there. Never the quickest but always left on time, which is a nice
There
way
you
of putting
go.
it.
There you go.
Like at times, actually, Niall O'Mara ended up in his fullback line the other day because with the little bit of switching going on, and obviously his hamstring injury, he had to sit back a bit more. And you know yourself, sometimes you can get through a game, but then the hamstring might flare up later in the week. Now we'll hope that his actually improves as the week goes on.
It's
But
funny you should say that, Shane, because I know you played a senior B final a couple of years ago, didn't you? With half a hamstring, I would say, or you came on in it. There are certain games that you will get away in it, and I never forget playing a game out in Banner 4 or 5 years ago, and like it was on 60% of a hamstring, and they put whoever we were playing put a mulliker in on top of me, and I was like, literally, like, this is brilliant. If they put the nippy corner forward in, I was gone. Because even the runs he was making, false runs, I was gone. So kind of you can get away with it on a given day. Ballygunner will go after him, I'd imagine. There's no point in saying any different. They'll go, like Pádraig Matney would generally play there. I would anticipate someone who will move even more than him, potentially going out to centre forward being a headache, even more of a headache for Niall O'Mara, and making him track runs where the player in question mightn't even be getting the ball. Someone like a Mikey Mahoney or a Kevin Mahoney would be an absolute nightmare, just darting left, darting right. And could take a lot of juice out of Niall O'Mara even 25 minutes into the game.
Yeah, like the more you go through it, ultimately you run out of matchups for Killerwan, and I think you are going to be struggling to see where they're going to get enough scores. They will need goals. So Cian O'Kelly, assuming he's okay, he's going to have to be a battering ram. They're going to have to get the ball into Jerome Cahill, and maybe he'll move out the field and somebody else will move in at times as well. But they're going to have to get the ball in his hand. Willie Cleary, as he tends to do, is going to have to knock over every free. And Cian Darcy, like last Sunday, he's going to have a day of days. And by the way he finished, especially that second goal at the end of the game, like he hit it and you expect it to sort of, like the way most guys hit a shot and it goes into the top corner, arrows in, but it flashed in. It was like, that was a real proper strike of a ball. And when you think of players who flash the ball into the back of the net, who else comes to mind? I mean, Joe Canning would obviously come to mind. There's got to be a few out there, but who comes to mind for you? TJ Reid, obviously.
Owen Kelly would definitely be one. Remember that one against Cork a few years ago? It was Cork.
Yeah, 08.
Where he threw one of the defenders aside. Can't remember who it was, and it like Cusack was where he was supposed to be, and you're looking behind you, looking for the ball because it flashes in that quickly. There's probably a couple more, but he would definitely be the one where if he got a shot away, it was generally a bullet.
Yeah, and it really was good from Cian Darcy, but he's going to need to have a big game. And I think that midfield of Ballygunner that we talk about a fair bit over the last few years, Conor Sheehan and Paddy Levy, they are two workhorses. But you'd have to say that Sean McAdams and Mark O'Neill have been really good on the other side for Killerwan. And it's just going to have to be a day of days for Killerwan, I think, if they're going to put it up to Ballygunner here. But look, ultimately, given the walking wounded that they have, and they don't have Craig Morgan, and you know that Ballygunner have had a long time to size themselves up for this game, and they have a lot of county players there, it is really hard to look beyond Ballygunner here, isn't it?
Yeah, Shane Power is an interesting comment in there. Do you not think the game being in Walsh Park rather than Thurles actually suits Killerwan better? Smaller pitch, less space for Ballygunner forwards. Yeah, potentially. I'll tell you why
I'll say no, because they're a team that's trying to get themselves right just a week after winning the county title and a few days of being on the beer and all that kind of stuff. The extra 2.5 hours to get from Killerwan down to Walsh Park means you're going to have to wake up that bit earlier, get used to unfamiliar surroundings. I just think Thurles would be more familiar, and it's a half hour out the road.
If Walsh Park was on their doorstep, I'd say yes. But the travelling thing, and it's just, I don't know what time the game is on. I presume it's 2 or 2:30 on Sunday.
It's 1:30.
Yeah, it could be 1:30. I'm actually going down covering it myself, but it's just like you'll have to be up. You'll have to have the breakfast got at a very, very early hour, and then you're on the road and moving. The dimensions of the pitch will suit them better. The travel and everything else involved definitely won't.
Yeah, I have a quick little clip here with Desi Hutchinson talking about Patrick Fitzgerald, the young dynamo, and then we'll be back with David Connors of the Tuam Hurl at the far side of it. I suppose if the age grades weren't the way they are, you probably would have even been looking to introduce him last year.
Yeah, we would have. I'd say most definitely. Like, there was time after they would have won an under-20 with Ballygunner last year, and they'd done a bit of training with us as well. So he was around our group and he was trained. He played a couple of internal games with us and that. And he didn't look out of place at all. So if the grades were still the way they used to be, he probably would have made an appearance for us, like, you know. But look, he's so young and he's loads of time on his hands, and he's going to get great experience over the next few years with us.
Yeah, and did you get a chance to watch Killerwan against Killadangan the other day? What are your thoughts on Killerwan?
Yeah, I did actually watch both games. Look, they're a really honest, hard-working team. Exactly what you expect from a team coming out of Tipperary, like, you know what I mean. So they're going to be right up there, and they're going to be a huge challenge for us. And we're not looking past that whatsoever. We know what we're going to have to do to beat them. And obviously they're coming off a huge high after winning the county title for the first time in 37 years, I think it is. So look, they'll be really looking forward to it as well, and it makes for a great game.
Yeah, so Desi obviously very respectful of the challenge they're going to have this weekend, and the full interview is at OurGame.ie. Delighted now to bring in David Connors of the Tuam Hurls. David, how are things with you?
Good, lads, and yourselves?
Yeah, sure, not too bad. We're hanging in there. The Galway semi-finals this weekend. Sarsfields are up against St. Thomas's, and Loughrea will meet Clarenbridge, who got to the final last year. We start off with Sarsfields against St. Thomas's. They're chasing 5 in a row. How have St. Thomas's been playing this year?
Good in patches and bad in patches, and you know they've done what's required of them, Shane. You know, like probably all good champions, they're where they wanted to be. Like I suppose at the start of the year, they topped their group. I suppose the result that probably stood out for everyone was when Thurlockmore beat them by, finished with 15 points and ended the 22-game unbeaten run. So, but other than that, they responded well against Clarenbridge. Like they were 10 points down at half time, and then there was minus Fintan Burke, David Burke. I think lost John Head as well to injury. They had no Shane Cooney, and they managed to turn it around and win by 4. So, like, you know, that was a standout result. I suppose with Sarsfields the weekend, they met in the groups. Like Sarsfields probably could have beaten them as well. They were Sarsfields missed 2 penalties. It was I think it was 48 scores in the game, but completely different weather conditions this time of year now, coming into the winter, and I don't think we'll have a shootout like that. Sarsfields missed 2 penalties on that day as well. You know, I think they might have come away with the game feeling like they could have defeated them, but all in all, Thomas has been good in patches. They didn't need to be at their best last weekend against Capatagal. Capatagal were very middling, to tell you the truth. Thomas has never looked like being beaten and never really came out of second gear. So Sarsfields coming down the tracks, if they probably produce what they did against Capatagal, you know what I mean, there's every chance of an upset. But you'd imagine this, when semi-finals now comes around, Thomas is kind of do find an extra gear, and you know, they're well suited to these type of weather, and they've been here before and done it as well. So you'd be expecting probably best performance of the season coming up.
Verney?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. This has probably not been as convincing, David, maybe as other years, but like it can't stay like that. The unbeaten run has to go at some stage. You're going to throw in a few bad performances. If anything, you want to be beaten in a group game where you can bounce back rather than beaten in a knockout game where it's all over for you. So do you think even that was a sufficient boot in the backside to maybe regroup and come back again, and even been down as they were against Clarenbridge, and maybe it looking like, oh, potentially we're going to get beaten twice in a row here, but they were able to turn things around and get back on the horse again? That's, you know, that's sign of a really good side, being able to turn things around mid-season like that. And they might have just got that gentle nudge that they needed, maybe just to get things firing on all cylinders again.
Absolutely, I agree totally. Like that was kind of the nature of it, and I think it's been referenced a lot in Galway that the fact that they did get the defeat at the right time. And I suppose when that kind of unbeaten run is hanging over you, it can be a noose around your neck at times as well. So to have that now out of the way, and just the sole focus being on winning the semi-final and maybe getting on course for the 5 in a row is massive. Just from the Clarenbridge game, like there was, you know, it seemed like, you know, a huge moment or defining moment. Like I remember after the game, like I've been told, actually, sorry, I wasn't actually at it, I was covering another game, but Thomas were applauded off the field by their supporters in terms of the turnaround. It just felt like a huge moment in their season. Like they had a lot of obstacles to overcome, being 10 points down against last year's runners up, minus, as I said, Fintan, David Burke, John Head, Shane Cooney, and to turn it around against what a lot of people would argue maybe the second, third, fourth best team in the competition. And you know, for that, you know, it offered them as well, you know, a direct route into the quarterfinals. Whereas if they were beaten or had drawn the game, they would have only reached the preliminary quarterfinals. So it was a perfect time for the defeat. Like, if there's no perfect time to lose, but it probably was, from a Thomas's point of view, would focus the minds again. Maybe, you can probably become a little bit, not like complacent would be the wrong word, but a little bit stale, when you're on this run and things seem to be going so well. So definitely refocus the mind, and they're hugely experienced as well. Like, so, if any team can bounce back in the correct way, it's probably Thomas's.
In terms of the playing staff that they have at the moment, I think there was talk of Shane Cooney returning after the cruciate. What do we know about him? He didn't feature last weekend, did he? Or did he?
Did.
Oh, did he?
He did. Yeah, he came on with about 10 minutes to go. First game since that cruciate injury he picked up. Like, he picked that up in the lead up to the Ballyhale game last year. I think it was a challenge game against Inui in Dangan where it occurred. So that was his first action. I know he was away travelling. He was away with Conor Whelan. The two of them were in Asia. So he didn't feature. Maybe he could have come back before that, but that was his first run. It looked a little bit, we saw of him, the little cameo. He looked sharp. Hurling looked good. He's a huge option. Like, whether they start him or not the next day remains to be seen. But, like, even if you don't slot him in at 6, he's a customary 6. Like, he's more than capable of doing the job for you at wing back, or even corner back at club level. So, like, a huge bonus. Like, it's the right time of year to have someone like Shane coming back and returning as well. So it's a huge boost for them. Like, they seem to have this knack of being able to, like we take with Fenton a few years ago against Lee Mellows, where he turned the tide, and that after coming on as a sub in attack. Maybe having someone like Shane's quality coming back in as well at the same time could be the boost they need, and maybe could be the difference, in a final or semi-final in what is likely to be 2 very close games.
Where do you think that Sarsfields can hurt Thomas's? Everyone knows about Joseph Cooney. They're playing centre back, and geez, one of the frees he hit from 100 yards the other day was very impressive. But who else can hurt Thomas's?
Kevin Cooney, obviously the brother, is, I think, he's seen 5 or 6 goals this year in as many games. Now, he butchered a couple of chances against Portumna the last two that he wouldn't have been happy about, but other days they go in the back of the net, and it's a lot more comfortable win. Looking through the rest of the team, Niall Morris, he's fairly deadly from frees. Especially this time of year, you don't want to be coughing up too many handy scores in front of the post, because he will punish you. Alex Kinnear, probably one of their stars in the under-20 team that lost the A final in Galway, the A county final. He's looked brilliant. Like, he looks like a future Galway senior, really, given the skill levels, and his matchup maybe with someone like Davy Burke in midfield, the old master against the budding apprentice could be a good battle. But Sarsfields, one thing about them, they have a lot of man markers. Like, they have like Joseph, as you mentioned. They have Darren Morrissey, the Kevin Hines. Like, they have a lot of man markers that could check plenty of the Thomas's, the front 6. Whether you run out of them for finish, I don't know. But that's defensively that they won't have too many issues there. Like, it's maybe probably racking up of scores up the other end that could be the issue if there is any. But they have players that can do damage as well, as I said, like the likes of Kevin Cooney, and even young Darren Murphy as well. He's another under-20, but he's been a revelation this year in the club championship, and I suppose you'd be looking to get plenty out of him as well if Sarsfields are to get over the line.
David, we played Sarsfields last year in a club game, and they were kind of playing a sweeper, and it was a real kind of possession style game. I think it was the Bruiser was over them. I think the Bruiser from Clare, I think, was over them last year, and Saoirse Bulfin was involved. Is it still that type of game, or is it a bit more like when you have someone like Cooney at the edge of the square, are they going a bit more kind of direct or route one, or is it still kind of that kind of possession kind of sweeper game where they're all kind of attacking in waves?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a combination of both. This mix. Aidan Donoghue was over them this year, so he would have hurled in a lot of like really strong or Sarsfields teams in the past. So yeah, they've Denny Cahill training them as well. Like, so you know what you're going to get. Like, Denny's done the rounds a few times, and he was with Thomas's before as well. I think he was with them during that 2012, 2013 breakthrough year. Yeah, no, it's a combination, Michael. They're more than capable of going direct, but it's kind of like they haven't really, John Cooney is a kind of a target man for them as well, but he's not going to rack up huge amount of scores at centre forward. That's where he's been playing normally, and most other teams he'd be probably centre back. But with Joseph there, you're not going to shift him from that. Like, I think Joseph started in attack at the start of the year, but they've kind of reversed it around as the year has progressed. Yeah, no, they try to play a sweeper. Like, well, in fairness, Portumla were the ones who win with a sweeper the last day out, and initially they started with Joseph sweeping, but such was the damage that Joe Kenning was doing at wing forward, they had no choice to shift Joseph across, and I suppose like you're probably looking at something similar with Thomas's. It's probably going to be a battle at the Coonies, with Joseph probably picking up Connor. Connor is absolutely devastating at club level. There's probably been no better forward in Galway over the last decade than him. And so, like, you're probably going to have to shut him down straight away. And Joseph is probably already ready-made man to do that. Whether that takes you away of Joseph's going forward ball playing skills is another thing, and whether that'll hurt Sarsfield remains to be seen. But yeah, their style is it's a combination. Like, sometimes they're more than capable of going through the lines, as I said, with Alex Kinnear and players like this. But they're also capable of going direct into the corners, like your Darren Murphy or your Kevin Cooney, and their pace can really hurt teams as well. So when they get it inside, they're more than happy to go for goal if the opportunity presents itself. And we've seen that plenty of times over the course of the season.
ML89 has corrected me, Shane. It was Castlegar I was mixing them up with. Now, we did play Sarsfields as well last year. And I'm just thinking, Aidan Donoghue play wing forward for Sarsfields taking frees in the 90s. I think he was playing against Borough in 98 when we beat them, when we won All-Ireland. I just put that in there as well. I remember the name. And in fairness, when you say Denny Cattle's involved as well, by Jesus, he has been up and down the country, spreading the gospel everywhere and anywhere, in fairness to him. Shane, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, he actually trained us. I'm nearly sure he did a training session with us in Burris once. That wasn't today or yesterday now, mind you. Loughrea and Clarenbridge, David. So two up-and-coming teams. Loughrea doing really well, won all their group games, won last week as well. I think that's 6 wins out of 6 in the championship. Tommy Kelly having a great year with them. And Clarenbridge, all that underage success. They look like a team last year getting to the final. They look like a team that should be there for the next while challenging.
Yeah, and oddly enough, like, I suppose if you're looking at the betting odds according to Paddy Power, like Clarenbridge are the outsiders in this to win this championship. I think they're 11-2. Sarsfields and Loughrea are giant 10-3, and Thomas's are 10-11. So that's kind of telling enough. I suppose Clarenbridge, they've been good in parts, bad in parts as well. Like, that defeat against St. Thomas's would have been one that they would have really, would have been a tough one to overcome. But in fairness, they've bounced back with 2 wins since. They were 7 points down at the last weekend against Tommy Larkins, and they turned it around with 3 goals in the second half. Young team, like you said, like, they've plenty of firepower in attack. It's like TJ Brennan has been playing centre forward for them this year, so they kind of realised maybe they need another ball winner there in the 45 in terms of under puck outs, or on the 65 under puck outs and things like that. So he's been an interesting addition to the attack, and they've been like a host of other names, like, well-known names like your Mark Kennedys, your Evan Lyland, obviously, Gavin Lee, Keane Salmon, and Mikey Daly, and then you've Niall Armstrong to come on, and he scored 3 massive points after coming on at last weekend as well for them. So, kind of was a big scores. But the probably Loughrea are the same. Like, Loughrea have a multitude of forwards, maybe not overly well known faces, like, but they'd be well known in Galway. And like, between the combination, they scored 15 points in play between Anthony Burns and Martin McManus, has been a revelation as a ball winner. Neil Carey and Jamie Ryan, who was absolutely, like, Jamie Ryan was absolutely incredible at the weekend. Like, Joe Kenning wowed the fans in the first game, but Jamie Ryan was every bit as good in the second game.
So I was going to say Jamie Ryan looked every inch a county player, and I was thinking maybe Henry Shefflin will be a bit interested in him.
It's like, there's no point in saying otherwise. I don't think there's 30 better hurlers in the county than Jamie Ryan, for sure. Like he has pace. He's able to take a score. Like, he's a bit of a magician in the ways. Like, he can take on people, and his show and go is fantastic to watch as well. But it's like if the weather wasn't like what it's been like so far, you would think this would be an absolute shootout. But like, last year, these two teams met, and I think it was a Dower 112 to 19 with Clarenbridge obviously prevailing in torrential conditions. But I think Loughrea have improved. Like, you mentioned Tommy Kelly there, like, he was involved with Matty Kinney, like he was very involved with Kula anyway, for sure. And he's highly rated, like, really, really astute. Man, like, really astute manager, should I say? And like, they've Greg Kennedy involved, they've Gavin Carey, the people like this year. So that, like, and like how they set themselves up very well against more. They pinpointed maybe a couple of weaknesses, like they, in terms of the forwards, they got their matchups bang on. Whereas Thurrock wanted to kind of hold their six in the positions they were in. Like Loughrea kind of pinpointed good matchups of themselves, and it took Thurrock a while to adjust to it, which proved costly in the end. But like on paper, it should be a shootout. But like this is in Salt Hill. It's probably likely going to be rain, and that'll have a huge bearing on the game.
So comment in here from ML89, Clarenbridge haven't been impressive. Poor against Ardrahan and Tommy Larkins. TJ Brennan has been wasted in the half-forward line. Fancy Loughrea to take them. Jamie Ryan has been doing this for years. Would you agree that TJ Brennan is wasted in the half-forward line?
Probably disagree, to be honest. I think I suppose you probably need. You probably would prefer if you had everything right, TJ Brennan at centre back or full back or something like that. But I suppose they feel like they need a bit of a ball winner up there as well. I know Keane Salmon is in full forward, but in terms of puck outs and stuff like that, if you've a half forward line of Evan Ireland, Mark Kennedy, and say Mikey Daly, like you're going to struggle to win primary possession there without someone like TJ. Like, and TJ scored a goal like the last day to seal it as well. Like he mightn't have the scoring power of the other Clarenbridge attack, but like he offers you something different. Like he's kind of like, say, similar to maybe a Bonner Maher at 11 or something like that for Tipper. In the past, like he's one of those who. Probably he'll stop a lot of centre backs from hurling as well. Wasted, I probably wouldn't agree with that phrasing of it. But you would like to probably see him as a defender, out and out defender. But I wouldn't be too disappointed to see him starting an attack for you either. And I think he's a fine option there for Clarenbridge.
And just one final thing, we'll get your predictions. But Galway got an All-Star last week. Last week, Pádraig Mannion. Did you expect more, or were you happy enough to get one?
I probably thought it would be one, to be honest with you. Maybe Joseph Cooney, maybe someone like Joseph Cooney was, if you think about it, he was Galway's top scorer from play before he had to switch back to centre back following Garage McInerney's injury against Cork, and then he played centre back against Limerick as well. Maybe his versatility punished him, in kind of a way like that. But maybe not. Maybe Whelan was an outside, like some of Whelan's scores this year were fairly low percentage efforts, and they all seem to float over the bar by and large. So maybe, but Leinster final really put them back a bit. They weren't overly impressive against Cork either, and I know they ran Limerick close, but it's probably one was probably as much as we could ask for. Maybe Clare were a bit lucky to get three, but that's the luck of the draw at the end of it, like.
Sowed into those neighbours from Clare. So then, finally, let's get your predictions for the two games: Sarsfield Thomas's and Loughrea Clarenbridge.
I'd probably go with Thomas's and Loughrea, to be honest with you. Thomas has just been there, done it, have the know-how to do it in these type of games. And as a fella said to me, when it kind of enters four-wheel drive type of season, Thomas's are perfect for that. Like once the ground gets soft, they're really, really good as well. Like at dealing with that, it'll be a close game. I don't see either of the two teams running out comfortable winners. Thomas has just this kind of knack for winning close games, and I expect that to be the same. I don't expect Sarsfield to cough up many chances, but I suppose just there's so many Thomas's threats in that attack, and with Shane Cooney returning as well, possibly for 20 minutes, maybe the next day or something like that, that could be huge and could potentially swing the tide in a close game. Second game, I just kind of think Loughrea have been better this year. I think they've come on a lot. I think they've come on leaps and bounds since their 3-point defeat to Clarenbridge last year. I just think they have that nice blend of youth and experience. Like they've a lot of county minors over the last couple of years, and like they've even someone like Tiernan Killeen who was in with Galway this year, but like even he hasn't been like probably within their top 7-8 players of the campaign, which is telling enough. So like they just have a lot of threats. There are a lot of players like say Martin McManus, who definitely you mentioned Jamie Ryan for looking with Galway. You're definitely looking to see someone like Martin McManus get a run maybe in the Walsh Cup or something like that, because he is a very good ball winner. He seems to be something that maybe Galway are lacking a bit. But yeah, so just I think Loughrea are going to turn the tide in this one. Again, don't expect much in it. They've been really good. I think Johnny Cohen has been excellent in a man-marking role, and I expect him to go on. Someone like Evan Ireland. Paul Houben has been fine at full back as well. So yeah, no, I just think maybe Loughrea carrying that better form, and I think they'll probably get over the line in the end.
Verney, you have it there. You're going to read that one out?
Yeah, yes, it's all right. Just says will be a 10-year anniversary of the famous 2012 final if Thomas's and Loughrea come through. That was an absolute bruiser. I can remember that, and I'm sure you do too as well, David. Clarenbridge and Loughrea is the battle of the two common sides, isn't it? Really, and Clarenbridge were in the final last year, obviously beating a couple of points. Loughrea have been very good the last couple of years. If they were to get to a final, they're the sort of team potentially that would. I just have a feeling if they get to a final, that they wouldn't have the fear of Thomas's, and they would want. I think if there's an upset to be caused, maybe it could be them this year. Is that kind of a battle of the two teams that could potentially dominate after this Thomas's era comes to an end in time? I'm not saying it's coming to an end now, lads. You don't need to put it into a WhatsApp group or anything like that. But I'm just saying, are they the two next teams that are potentially going to take over or take that mantle on the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think so. And Turlockmore maybe, and Oranmore Marry as well. They're just kind of teams that are close to the city. I suppose Loughrea, they have a good motorway link to it as well. But yeah, for sure. Loughrea, just on that, just was mentioned there, that 2012 final, like Loughrea are a completely different team now. They're not the physical, doggers that they were back then. Like it's very much their hurling now that's got them. They got them to this point, and it's a completely different team. Like
you don't expect this man to come back, David. No, if they do get to the final.
No, you'd see him at the games, all right. Like, and you'd be always wondering would he strip off, but no, maybe he's a couple of scores to settle. But
he couldn't have any more to settle now at this stage.
Yeah, no, but on your question, I suppose they are the two common teams. Like Clarenbridge this year, they're in the minor A final. They're sixth since 2015, and they're playing Oranmore this weekend. It's on Saturday as well, and Aaron Island is coming there, so we don't need to talk him up after last year. So these are. I really like Loughrea this year. I just been so impressed with them the whole way through, and I think they're going to make the final this year, and I think they in the coming years I can see them definitely get their hands in the Tom Cannon Cup again.
Brilliant stuff, David Connors of the Tuam Hurl. Thanks very much, and we'll chat to you again soon.
No bother, lads.
Cheers, Dave. Shane, I have to put you on something. You mentioned about Shane Cooney being back among the playing staff with St. Thomas's. I don't know how much NFL you were watching, but I didn't get a chance to pull you up during it. By God, that's not coming into our vernacular here. We would not mention playing staff again. If you said coaching staff, I'd say something. And just on that, the setup that Loughrea have sounds very inter-county-esque by the sounds of things. And for a team that's looking to make the breakthrough, to have the likes of Tommy Kelly, to have the likes of Greg, Gavin Carey, who was coach with Clare before and is a really well-heralded coach, sounds like they have a deadly setup there. And the sort of setup that a young, kind of prospering side seems to be thriving under as well.
Yeah, in their match last weekend, Paul Hooban scored an own goal. Well, it clipped off him on the way in, so it would be an own goal. And Johnny Cohen scored a penalty. Those are two things you wouldn't really expect to hear from a match report, but so it is. Hey, Sully 180, St. Thomas's have a great roster. Look, I was midway through a sentence and I was like, how am I going to finish this sentence off? And you know the way you say backroom personnel or something like that, or backroom staff or management. Yeah, look, I got it wrong. And there's not going to be a repeat.
Hey, Shane, just back to this for a second. Have you ever seen anything like it? Like, if you showed this to someone, particularly that penalty incident with Johnny Matter, and he just causing wreck and kicking lads and jabbing lads, like, that will be shared until the end of time, I'd imagine. It's just one of those absolutely iconic GA moments. It was ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, to use your own sort of examples, it's like someone coming into a wrestling ring and just cleaning house, knocking lads over in all directions. It was a bit like that. SSRI says Loughrea were one of the roughest teams in Ireland in the noughties. All right, very physical. Yeah, I actually played against them once. I think it was out in Drummond. Yeah, there was a bit of tasty stuff going on the same day. So, yeah, they definitely had a reputation. It was fairly well earned, wasn't it?
It was. I remember playing them down in Loughrea. I don't know if it's changed since, because I haven't been down there in a few years. But I don't know if it's a wall of a stand or what it is, but the wall around the sideline, the stand side of the pitch, is ridiculously close to the sideline. And I just remember it getting heated enough with, it was Barry Whelan and one of the Loughrea lads, could have been even Greg back in the day. But it was a recipe for disaster. It was just a wall within about 3 or 4 feet of the pitch. And you're just thinking, I'll tell you one thing. Now, when Padjo was over Burr, if you wanted, to really test a couple of young fellas, Loughrea were the team to play. If you could survive against them, you could probably survive against anyone. But as David says now, they play a completely different style now. It's a much younger side. much more of a ball playing side as well, I'd say too.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a very common side. And look, Greg Kennedy's an angel. I won't have a bad word said against him. We were out at his complex. He has a driving range and a trackman golf setup. It's absolutely class out there in Loughrea. So ideal for a stag and the likes. There's fencing all around the pitch, very close to the sidelines, all right, in St. Brendan's Park in Loughrea. So we'll move on to the Munster Intermediate Championship this weekend. There's 2 former senior All-Ireland club winners in this championship. So Roscrea are involved from 1971, the first ever All-Ireland Club Senior Championship, and St. Joseph's Doura Bearfield, 1999 champions. So Roscrea will meet Ballysaggart, and Doura Bearfield will meet Causeway of Kerry. And I think, look, Roscrea have been very good. They won that county final against Gurtnahoe Glengool recently. Liam England is over the team, and I suppose midway through the championship, he got Eddie Brennan involved as well. So they've been playing some good stuff. Alan Tynan has come back from injury. People might remember him being involved with the Munster rugby setup and so on. So they're a team that it feels like, big village team that's traditionally, obviously got hurling quality. They would say we shouldn't be down in Premier Intermediate in Tipperary in the first place. And no doubt, like Liam England has kind of said it himself. There were, 4 games from Croke Park, or that's what he said before the county final.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Yeah, Roscrea would have been, competitive at senior for a long time and probably dipped the last couple of years. But they're back where they want to be anyway for next year. And this is going to be an interesting game at the weekend. Ballysaggart obviously have lost Kieran Bennett, but they still have Stephen and Shane. I think Shane has delayed his travels a bit more. Ballysaggart put up a huge score against Ballygunner in that final. That go to extra time, I think, and they were just caught in extra time the same evening. But they're obviously a side who've played a couple of years senior in Waterford as well. And obviously in Stephen Bennett, they have a guy, particularly at this time of the year, that could put up 113, 114 and win a game by himself. So I'm not sure how I'd price this game up. But obviously Roscrea have been going up until 2 weeks ago, probably enjoyed their celebrations and came back. Ballysaggart finished probably the guts of about 2 months ago. Don't know if many of those guys were kicking football or what they were doing, but I'm sure, they knew there was a Munster Club campaign coming and they probably regrouped in the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I'd probably just about favour Ballysaggart, funnily enough. But I wouldn't be surprised if the fact that Roscrea have been playing up until recently and haven't had any break might just see them over the line. Andrew Sullivan said there that Roscrea are 1-10, which I find, unless the bookies do, maybe they know something completely different than what I know, but I know that Ballysaggart are a good side and that if they're on it and have been training, that they won't be far off.
Well, they were competitive at senior level before going back down, so there is that. But then you'd ask, well, once you go outside the first top 2 or 3 teams within the county, is there a big drop-off in Waterford compared with maybe Tipperary? Now, I'm not saying there is, but I'm saying is that being reflected in the odds here? Because I think if Roscrea next year, they could actually have quite a good year at senior level, assuming they keep that team together.
Just on that, Ballysaggart in a Munster Intermediate Club final a couple of years ago. Something seems to ring a bell. I think they were a couple of years ago. So they're fairly well accustomed with this level. And listen, I don't know the ins and outs of what they've been doing for the last while, but they knew this was coming. It's not something that just sprung upon them.
They lost to Father O'Neill's in 2019, 215 to 17 points. So they actually gave it a right good burst as well to get there.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think those odds are a bit skewed. They're probably about 5-1 underdogs. They're definitely not a 5-1 shot. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, so you're saying there's value in going with them either way. But Roscrea have lots of quality there. I've already mentioned Alan Tynan, but Evan Fitzpatrick, Jason Fitzpatrick, goalkeeper Darren Ryan, he had a great game the last day. They do have plenty of good players there, and they're probably playing a little bit below themselves, as I've already said, not being in the top tier in Tipperary. But of course, they will be there next year. So that's one game certainly to watch out for. ML89, Waterford have a lot better record in recent times than Tip in Intermediate. But of course, a lot of that has to do with the Tipperary team that, let's say, went through to the Intermediate last year was the third tier winner. So it was team number 33 in Tipperary, whereas this year, the Tipperary team that's going through to the Munster Intermediate is the 17th team, we'll say, in the rankings, because it's a top 16 in Tier 1 and then 16 in Tier 2. So it'll be interesting to see how far a Tipperary team goes this year. But ultimately, you're still going to come up against, whether it's Roscrea or somebody else, Kilkenny have their 13th best team in Danesfort out. So again, that's helping them and should help them, in terms of collecting titles over the next few years. So any county that has any more than 12 is putting themselves at a disadvantage against the likes of Kilkenny.
Yeah, well, I put it to you this way. We've gone with, we had 10 this year, but we had 8 a couple of years ago at senior. So that means Senior B the winners of the Senior B were going into Leinster Intermediate. They were the 9th best team in Offaly a couple of years ago. They're the 11th best team now, which means they're obviously, like like Shamrocks, who were beaten in the Offaly Intermediate final by our second team last year, got to the Leinster Junior final and were beaten by Mooncoin last year. You know what I mean? That wouldn't have happened before. So it's definitely helping us. So I'd imagine it would help. I'd imagine it would massively help Tip as well. SSRI just says, should Lura not be in it? They're in the Munster, going to be in the Munster Junior, I presume, now.
No, they're not in it at all.
They're not in
That's
it at
their
all.
season done. So I'm not exactly sure who won the next tier in Tipperary, just off the top of my head. I probably would know if I thought about it long enough.
Okay, so because they split it a bit, the team that won the lower of those two competitions is not going into the provincials at all.
So last year, obviously, the senior team went through to the Munster Senior. The Premier Intermediate team didn't go through at all, and the third tier team did. This year, it's the second tier going through, and I'm pretty sure, from chatting to Shane Brophy on Tipcast this week, that there's no team going through at all from the third tier. After it's so convoluted.
It's still not as convoluted as Cork, though.
No, and to be fair now, they are trying to simplify Cork a little bit, but we'll be coming to that a little bit later on. St. Joseph's Doer Bearfield will meet Causeway also in this Munster Intermediate Hurling Championship. And Doer Bearfield, a former Clare player, Oisin O'Brien, in as their coach this year. He's also involved with TUS, their team. Alan O'Neill, who would have been with Tony Kelly in that group at minor and under 21 level, he's the main guy. David Conroy also. Causeway, they haven't played in 13 weeks. Are we going to give them an excuse over that? They're senior champions going into an intermediate.
Yeah, no, they shouldn't have much of an excuse now, to be fair. And I know a few of them are probably kicking ball and might still be playing ball now at this stage. But they've had, I don't know how long you take off exactly. I'd imagine you take a good 5 or 6 weeks off and then go back maybe training once a week, then into twice a week and play a few challenge games or whatever. But they are a senior team going in. And obviously, last year, who were the champions last year? Went all the way to the All-Ireland Club final. So, theoretically, you're thinking that they should have a good shot at this. But again, you don't know how they've managed the gap. It'd be the same. It's going to be the same when we see Ferns in the Leinster Senior Club Championship. How did they manage that gap? And that'll be fascinating to see as well. But Causeway, providing they've been doing what they should be doing over the last while, should definitely give this a good shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk. Yes, Jason Diggins and the likes of Brandon Barrett will be carrying the mantle for them. Their last game was that county final win over Ballyduff, 2-15 to 16 points. In the junior, then Ballygiblin, who are reigning Munster Junior Hurling Club champions, they're against Grange Mokler, Ballyneal of Tipperary. So I was getting on to Vincent O'Toole, who regularly tries to explain the situation with the Cork Tiers, and I was asking him, how on earth are Ballygiblin still in the Munster Junior Championship? So this is his response. He said the Cork Hurling Championship grading system was subsequently changed after last year. So they now go Premier Junior Intermediate A and Premier Intermediate. Sorry, or is that Premier Junior Intermediate?
No, you have lost me.
And he said Ballygiblin under the old system were just junior, as in they won North Cork Division and then went into the county system. This year they were in a county-wide championship. So that's as clear as mud, yeah?
Shane, I'll tell you something. Once you start explaining, you're losing. There was a funny one a couple of years ago as well, where didn't Conaghy win the All-Ireland? Didn't Conaghy win the Junior All-Ireland, having not even won Kilkenny? And
they lost to O'Loughlin B in the county final.
Yeah, they were the defending All-Ireland Junior champions going back into the Kilkenny Junior Championship the year after. It's just amazing what happens in the GA.
Yeah. Actually, James Daly says Upperchurch beat Grange Mokler in the Tip Junior final. So Grange Mokler are playing Ballygiblin. Okay, so that clears that up as well. Off the top of my head, I couldn't think of it, but there you go. James Daly has cleared that one up for us. So that I suppose Ballygiblin with Mark Keane in the team, they're going to be favourites there. Kilgarvan will meet Banner of Clare in the other semi-final. So Shane Meehan is the star man of Banner here. You'd imagine that he's going to be the star man on show in this game. They were beaten in the quarterfinals of the Clare Championship, so it's mad. They haven't played since September the 11th, and they're only going forward because they were the last first team in the championship. So in the Clare Junior A quarterfinal, they lost to Aero Guinness, who are obviously their Ennis rivals, but they haven't played in almost 2 months. And I think they were knocked out very early before the quarterfinals in the football as well. Are we going to give Banner a pass here, or are we just going to expect Shane Meehan to take over against Buff and the Healy Rays club?
I imagine, yeah, Buff will definitely be there anyway. I'd imagine the Healy Rays will as well. No doubt fresh from going at the Taoiseach or going at the Taoiseach in Leinster House every chance they get. But yeah, it's a funny kind of a one, because I know there are definitely situations where clubs do not want this. Like, when you haven't earned it, they don't want it. If you've been to a final, it's one thing, but having been to been beaten in a quarter final, like you're falling into the provincial championships, really. Do you know what I mean? So it could be very, very difficult to regroup. It could be very, very difficult to get numbers. The year is finished on a pretty bad note in a quarter final, and a lot of lads, it might be difficult even to pull lads together. But they have a great player like Shane Meehan, an amazing prospect, and I'd imagine, some of the elder statesmen in the club are saying, look at the opportunity before you.
I'm a little torn on this one. In one way, I think that a second team should be allowed through, but the other side of it is it is nearly nicer to see the first team of a club through than another club's second team. And certainly the likes of a divisional team. Imagine if East Kerry were going through. That would be an absolute joke in terms of what they'd be able to do against most of the other club sides in the rest of the country. So that wouldn't be fair at all. But where do you stand on second teams going through?
Yeah, well, I'm playing for our own second team now, and I know that it would be a huge incentive for us. And I know you were playing for Coola's second team, and isn't it a massive incentive to potentially go on a provincial run? The problem is that you could have stacked teams, and you could have a lot of lads regrading themselves with the potential of getting on a run in that, and that's unfair in the sense that, you're manipulating the numbers within your club, or you're manipulating, and it's totally unfair, I would say, on whatever is the first team within another club. But I don't know. I think if some sort of regulations were put in place where, there's only a certain amount of players can be regraded from senior from the first team from the year before, or something like that. So you can't regrade, 11 or 12 or something like that, and take all the old stagers come back and have a right good run for the second or third team. But I do think it's a bit ridiculous when you're going to, a team that's been beaten in a quarter final. That's no disrespect to Banner, but I just think that's a bit mad. Like, they're not your county champions. They're not even your county finalists. They're not even your semi-finalists. You're going really, really deep down. I just say to you something as well on East Kerry last weekend. I just thought it was a bit mad. I know they're all playing again this weekend with their, native clubs, and, that was their divisional side the other day. But I just thought even the scenes at the full-time whistle were a bit bizarre after the Kerry final the other day. That's the cream of Kerry club football. And, there wasn't even hardly a lad with his hands in the air. It was going and shaking hands. And, I know they've won a couple.
It didn't mean enough.
It didn't mean enough. And I know they've won a couple in recent years. But, winning a county title should be dropping to your knees. It should be parents and brothers and sisters and friends running on. That's what it should be. And to me, it didn't look like it meant that much. I'm sure it did, but it didn't look like. I think the optics of it didn't probably look great. It looked like this all-conquering divisional side, and it looked like another title. It looked like Dublin winning Leinster to an extent.
Yeah, it did. And it's not like they won it last year or won 4 in a row and now it's a fifth one and you're like, all right. They regained the title. Normally when you regain a title, it's huge joy. And look, we're not slating the players. It's just, I think it kind of tells everyone what they already know, that there's just something not right with having divisional sides pasting everyone and winning a title like that. But just back to the second team thing. In a lot of, it's probably pretty much every county championship, no team's B team can get up to the top level. So, there was one stage that the Ballybay, I think, second team, this when they were winning 5 in a row in Dublin. So, a decade or so ago. And like at other stages, the Kilmacud second team, maybe the Coola second team, that they would have been good enough to probably win the second tier and get up into senior as well. So you could have A and B both in the senior championship. But that sort of stuff rightly isn't allowed for. I'd say the Burr team over the years as well would have been good enough to get up to the top tier. Would they have at any stage at all?
Yeah, there was a period, I was actually just checking just to make sure I had the right years. When Burr were going unbelievably well in the mid to late 90s, Burr won the intermediate championship, which was the second championship at the time, in 97, 98 and 99.
So would you have liked to have seen Burr with a first and second team in the senior championship?
No, bizarre.
Right. So then why should it be allowed in provincial championships?
Yeah, okay. But the only thing I'll say is within provincial championships, they're not going to be coming up against their own team. You're not dividing two clubs.
You could have a club that's got like massive playing numbers, like a couple of thousand members, and they're able to have an unbelievable second team, and they've been able to transfer in players and the whole lot because maybe maybe they're in an urban area, and all of a sudden they're getting there all the way to Croke Park, and it's, there's just something it doesn't sit easily with me, I have to say. I think the current system, it's not perfect, and you're going to end up with the odd situation like a Banner in there, even though they didn't win a quarter-final. It's not ideal, but I still think it's the lesser of two evils, or it's the purer way to go.
It's funny because I think you were on the other side of the fence when you started the debate, and now you're after moving to the other side. You definitely were. You were definitely thinking, I think maybe second team should be allowed in, and you're after doing it.
No. I don't think I ever quite did say it. No, I do think that now. The more I think it out, I do think it would probably be wrong to have second teams going through. And I know I was chatting to Derek Lynch, Clare FM about it, and he looks the other way in terms of this. But yeah, I think the more I tease it out, I'm inclined to think that we have the right system.
Now, your example on, whether a B team should be able to go in and represent go into the A Championship, the second team against the first team, I think that's totally convoluted in the sense of you actually would have two Birr teams facing off against each other, which would, in the one championship, which goes against the whole ethos of a club, and it would potentially create a rivalry within a club, and you might be trying to get lads back to your B team, and then there's all of a sudden this massive rivalry within your own club. So I definitely don't think that's right. I think in the provincial championship obviously would be different. It's just one team going through. But it's definitely I just think when it goes down to that quarter-final stage or that, I wouldn't be a big fan of that. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, get your comments in and let us know what you think. James Daly says, it appears won the senior hurling and intermediate football at the weekend with two totally different panels. Next weekend, they play the intermediate hurling final with Shane Dowling in goals, no competing with them. And John Crawford adds, Napier are very close in Limerick. They play intermediate this weekend. David Breen and Shane Dowling involved in the teams. Two lads who have played senior inter-county for Limerick in the last decade or so as well. And Breen, of course, was a captain. Just a reminder that our store has now been launched. You can get all sorts of GA memorabilia there, cups, T-shirts, shoes, the whole lot, towels, you name it, they're all there. Even if you want to get the old St. Verney mug there, it is available. So you can go there, ourstore.ie. We'll keep that whole our brand going, our this and our that.
And we have our game, our store, our fans.
And that's about the height of it, isn't it? Okay, so the Connacht intermediate semi-final this weekend, Turin against St. Gabriel's. Look, we know Turin, the Blue Devils in Mayo, have been very competitive over the last number of years. Tell us more about St. Gabriel's, who are managed by one of your fellow parishioners.
Yeah, Gabriel's had a very good win over the Emmets in the London final 2 weeks ago, managed by Niall Rogers, who would have played in a couple of county finals for Birr, would have played under 21 and minor for Birr as well. He's only probably about a year older than me, but he's finished up playing. They actually have another Offaly, a fella involved, Owen Kelly, who would have played in goals for Offaly, probably around 11 or 12, I'd say, a nephew of the great John Try, and similarly blessed wrists as John Try has. But they'll half fancy their chances there, I have to say. They'll half fancy their chances. They've had the 2 weeks. Not, a week after. They're obviously travelling over, which brings its difficulties. But it's funny, the Gabriels would be how to have a strong Galway connection. So they're going over to Connacht. A lot of lads are probably getting home for a day or two. And I think they'll fancy their chances. Now, to be fair, Turin have been very impressive at this level in recent years. So they couldn't probably be facing maybe more difficult opposition at this stage. But I definitely don't think it's cut and dry. Turin are most likely winners, but Gabriel's are a good side and they have a good spread of lads from different counties who are, stationed in London at the moment, and they'll fancy their chances of an upset.
Yeah, and Turin are looking for a provincial 3 in a row. They beat Ballyhaunis back in the 9th of October, 114-2-5. Players the likes of Shane Boland, Fergal Boland, Kenny Feeney, people will probably have heard of them over the years. Ace Hully 180 says, Neil Rogers, our lad.
Our lad, yeah, a great lad too. And in fairness, I think he's secretary. He's been secretary with the Gabriels for a long time, and he could be higher up even in the club at this stage. But a lot of times,
overlord, president,
maybe. But a lot of the time in England, there with those clubs, it is an awful lot of the players that are running the show within the club, doing secretary, doing PRO, doing chair, doing vice chair. There was actually two fellas in Cavan. Who when they were not Cavan, sorry, Sligo. Patrick O'Connor was one of them. He actually decided, along with one of his county mates at the time, to take on chair and vice chair of their own club during COVID, and ran the club pretty well, I think, for about 2 years, and then stepped aside. But I always think it's amazing. It is like a college setup where a lot of the players are kind of running everything, so they're totally invested in the club. They're either chair, secretary, as I said, PRO, whatever, and they're probably playing. They could be managing, they could be coaching as well. But yeah, a big day out for the Gabriels, and they'll be massive underdogs, but they'll fancy a shout.
Okay, in the Ulster Intermediate Hurling Championship, Éogar of Tyrone against Lisbolaw of Fermanagh. Lisbolaw won this in 2012. Onru of Derry will meet Middletown of Armagh, and Leitrim Fontenoys of Down will meet Castleblaney of Monaghan. The junior quarterfinals, Setanta meet Owenrua. Owenrua were senior champions in Tyrone 2018 and 19, but went to the Ulster Junior this year, and obviously are without Damien Casey, who sadly passed away this year. Also in the Ulster Junior, Cootehill Celtic of Cavan meet Antrim's Sean Tracy's. Namaha of Derry meet Warren Point of Down, and Carrick Macross meet Shane O'Neill's as well. So plenty of hurling going on this weekend. There's a bit of camogie too, but Shane Power says St. and Verney, our disciples.
There you go. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that. Anything you can put any words you can put our Egypts. You could also have obviously. There's probably lots of things, not particularly PC, that you could have as well. But there's a couple of big camogie games this weekend, and something that I just wanted to bring up because it kind of flew under the radar at the time. So there's a Munster Senior camogie semi-final this weekend. De La Salle, who are obviously first-time Waterford champions, against Drummond, who have picked up a good few Tipperary titles in recent years. But Joanne Ryan and Michelle Woodlock picked up their 7th tip title last month. And this is particularly interesting because Joanne is in her 26th season with Drummond, which is absolutely outstanding. And Michelle is in her 20th. And during those 20 years, she's had 5 babies, and she still hasn't missed a season. That is absolutely unbelievable.
Has she missed the game though?
She might have missed a game, but she has played. She's still managed to play during those whole 20 seasons, which is absolutely outrageous. That is going above and beyond. We'll never understand that, obviously, but it's absolutely unbelievable. Some commitment to the cause, even. And I know Andrew was watching. Like, he's over. Andrew Sullivan is over Burr, and they're playing Oulart later this month. And like, there's definitely 4 girls, I think, on the Burr team that have had children in the last year, 18 months, and we're all playing in the county final. Because it's great, because it's something that 10 or 15 years ago it probably would have signaled the end of your career. And I don't know if it's to do with more drive or improvements in strength and conditioning and whatever, but women are getting back playing not long after having children now, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable commitment to the cause. Yeah,
do you think men get enough credit for their part in the whole process?
I'd say we probably get too much credit. Because we do very little. And as someone said to me about the whole process, it's the one thing that you don't have to be good at to enjoy.
Spoken like a true champion. And Bruce says, well, lads, does hurling need rules on how to tackle, or should players just keep standing their ground and making themselves big? The tough, manly sport with no way of tackling. I'd say the same with Gaelic football as well. There's no way of tackling. We all kind of have a fair idea that should be allowed, that shouldn't be allowed. But that's just kind of the way of GAA. There doesn't seem to be any massive appetite to fully nail down what the tackle is.
There's no massive appetite to nail down what it is because, as you said there, nobody knows, and it's not clearly defined at all. And technically, I think technically a hook is actually within the rule. It's not within the rules technically, because you're actually using your hurl as striking potentially. So like the rule book definitely needs to be looked at in that regard. And I think it's something that rule makers are probably avoiding because of the mess that it would potentially create. I just put it up on Twitter yesterday. I did think it was fascinating. I watched back the Limerick final because it was away at the weekend, and I watched back the Limerick final. And like, I don't know if you saw it, Shane, but to me, Johnny Murphy refereed the game completely differently than I've ever seen him referee a game before. I thought it was, and I'm not saying it was given out or anything. I just think it was open season. Like, you were able to do anything you wanted, bar put your arm around a lad's neck. You got away with anything. And I think that was fascinating. Like, that's the same referee who blew over 50 times in Croke Park between Dublin and Wexford. One really bad evening. I remember Davey going mad about it. And obviously he's the same referee that was involved in those 2 big incidents between Lochmore and Ballygunner last year. And I just think, I just thought it was funny. I don't know whether it was because the game was broadcast live or what it was, but the rules were operated completely differently. You could say something similar about the All-Ireland final this year with, I would say, Colm Lyons refereed the All-Ireland final this year a lot different than he referees most games. But what you're saying about the tackle and that, it's like it is an interpretation that people know, that's a bit of a free, but I'm going to let it go for the sake of the game or whatever. So I don't think the tackling will ever be, I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of that until someone actually sits down and defines what you can and can't do. And if it's a case of you put your hand in, maybe that has to be a free. And it'll stamp it out completely. It'll be horrible for a short period of time, but maybe it'll stamp it out in time.
Yeah, well, I did like when they were stamping out the throws last year, and I'm hoping now that more and more referees don't buy the whole thing. When a player goes into a tackle, both codes puts the arm up and then a free is given straight away.
I'm liking that. A lot of referees are not. And said, I immediately in my head, I'm like, he didn't buy it. Brilliant. And I'm delighted because whether it's as a defender or a spectator, but a lot less referees are buying that type of thing now. If someone is trying to orchestrate a free, they just don't allow it to happen as much.
And there's a fair chance that a player will have taken 3 or 4 steps after he enters the contact when doing that sort of nonsense. So if a few players get pulled up for steps when they're trying to do that nonsense, that would stamp it out pretty quickly. But when you talk about referees refereeing it slightly differently, I was at the Tip Intermediate final last weekend, and John O'Grady fairly let it go. There'd want to be a funeral for the whistle to be blown during that game. Okay, so you mentioned the Munster senior semi-finals. Drummond Inch, De La Salle. De La Salle being managed by John Milan, who's a bit under the weather this week, but hopefully he'll be right for this. And Scarf Ogonolo will meet Sarsfields also in the other semi-final. So Scarf has been flying in the last few years. The intermediate will see Ahabalog of Cork meet Burrisley. So the women of Burrisley beat Shannon Rovers last weekend down in horrible conditions in the Rag after a terrible start to the game. I think they were 1-4 behind. But by God, they were partying into the night both Saturday and Sunday below.
So the women of Burrisley are keeping the honour of the town, the same as the women of Burr are keeping the honour of the town flying at the moment.
Well, look, that seems to be the case. Yeah. We're what can we do? And the junior then Adair will meet Tulla and Bricky Rangers meet Killard. The football Crossmaglen Rangers of Armagh will meet Ballybay of Monaghan. So I interviewed Paul Finlay, the former Monaghan man, about this. And it's 10 years since Ballybay had won a Monaghan title. And the last time they were in there, it was against Kilcoo at side. Now, they've plenty of survivors, Ballybay. So Ryan and Drew Wiley, Paul Finlay, who I've mentioned, Chrissy McGuinness, Thomas Kerr, Shane McQuillan, I should say. If they beat Crossmaglen, and obviously we'll talk about Crossmaglen in a second, but if they do manage to get over that hurdle, they'll be up against Kilcoo next. And Kilcoo are managed by Jerome Johnson, who obviously has a couple of sons on the current Kilcoo team. Or he's a joint manager of the team. So can you imagine for Jerome Johnson Sr. going, oh my God, am I going to have to be against my home parish now in a couple of weeks' time? That'll be a sickener.
It's the sort of thing that seems to always kind of throw itself together. Like we had that mad situation a couple of years ago as well, where Mick Fennelly and Johnny Kelly ended up on opposite sides in the All-Ireland Club final and on the same side with Offaly. And I'd flagged it to Johnny pretty far out because I thought it might happen. And he was just kind of batting it away. And he actually contacted me the next day and said, don't put that in or anything like to do with that. And but it's funny how these things happen within the GA. It's mad. And listen, that would be a bizarre scenario to throw up. Now Ballybay will definitely be underdogs coming into this. Crossmaglen were very good in the 46th Armagh senior football title win against Graham Moore, and they're going for their 12th Ulster title, obviously the most successful team in Ulster football history. And they're going to be hard stopped when you go down through. Like the likes of Rian O'Neill is probably a bit stung even by not getting an All-Star. And I think he even has a point to prove over the coming months, and that's a dangerous prospect as well. And Jamie Clark was very quiet in the county final, which again is another dangerous prospect for Ballybay at the weekend.
Cian McConville, he looks like a real common player. I think he scored 8 points in the county final, 4 of those from play. He just looks like someone who's really going to have to be tied down in that game. So I was even thinking beforehand, the two Wiley brothers, they're probably going to be posted on Rian O'Neill and Cian McConville. Now, maybe it'll be somebody else. Paul Finlay, and you can check out the interview I did with him at OurGame.ie. His wand of a left foot is going to have to be in serious operation for this match because I don't really think they can afford to miss in this match. Right, so the Ulster Intermediate round 1, Shane O'Neill's of Armagh, they'll play Cardiff of Monaghan, and then the Junior Football Championship quarter-final, Newtown Butler, first for Manas versus Na Piarsaigh of Antrim. we sometimes talk about club names, but Newtown Butler First Fermanagh. Now there is a name.
Well, like I've obviously driven through Newtown Butler a few times. What's the First Fermanagh's part of it? I don't get it.
Neither do I. If anyone out there knows, please do let us know.
As we've talked about, like peculiar club names, like seems like I don't know. It seems like an unnecessary add-on, but maybe someone might have a little bit insight as to why it's there, because it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Newtown Butler has got plenty of syllables in it already, without throwing another 2 words into it on the back of it.
Yeah, and still, I think my favourite, most obscure club name probably would have to be Ladies Walk.
I actually knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Because I've said it loads of times. Although Fighting Cocks is pretty good.
Fighting Carlow? Is it in Carlow?
Yeah. Then Halfway House Bunclody. I'd like to know why it's Halfway House. Well, it could be just that there's a place that's called Halfway House. Like, so, between Nina and Borrisoleigh is a pub called Young's. And back in the days when drink driving was encouraged, people would stop. people would stop there on the way back from matches in Nina, and they call it Young's at a halfway. So it must be just some place that's called a halfway house, and then it's just I suppose amalgamated with Bunclody or something like that.
Yeah, Colm Keogh on the 96 extra team was Halfway House Bunclody. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I know about it.
So that the Piercing team from Antrim, it's their second ever Antrim title last month. And I was reading in the Irish News, Brendan Crossan was talking to Pierce Donaghy, who's going to get an Antrim All-Star on Saturday night. And he goes, to be honest, it means an awful lot to be recognised. This is Donaghy, just for the next generation coming through, and that you don't have to move clubs, you don't have to play Division 1 football to have your talent recognised. The award is only going to benefit us as a community and a club in North Belfast, that there will be more eyes on us now, and we might get a few people interested in playing and staying on this side of the city. And just the article goes, over the years, so many Gaelic footballers from North Belfast migrated to some of the bigger clubs of West Belfast. Donaghy had many offers to join the Exodus and could have played at a higher level, but leaving the club that moulded him was non-negotiable. At underage, he says, I was always kind of thereabouts. When you played against teams from West Belfast, they come up to you afterwards and say, why are you playing for that team? Come and join us. It was kind of patronising. So to get this award on behalf of Pierce's means a lot. So he's obviously pretty delighted with that. And that, just to mention the other fixtures there, Cloister against Drumlane, T. Connacht against Stewartstown Harps, and Derrynoose meeting Letterkenny. But we're going to talk about the fact that the likes of David Clifford and, what a superstar in such a small club of Fossa, and obviously his brother as well. But even Pierce Donaghy there, the fact that he hasn't left his club. And we were talking about beforehand, who's the biggest superstar from an absolutely tiny club or a junior club or something like that you can think of? And get your comments in and let us know. But, a lot of times over the years, they have maybe transferred. But there are definitely some stars from across the country that come from tiny clubs, and they keep stum.
Yeah, well, Clifford is obviously the biggest, and we'll talk about Foss's semi-final maybe later. Gearóid Hegarty will be another one. He's obviously a hurler of the year from a junior club, and it's obviously a city club, but St. Patrick's is not a particularly big club. And I know a few people from down around there, and obviously it's probably obvious to say he's the pride and joy, but the fact that he has maybe stayed there and maybe potentially turned down some offers from some bigger clubs to play centre back with his junior team would definitely be one. That's Seamus Harney is a great example, because he was unheard of really even before he went in around that Cork scene. Obviously from the St. Edith's club, and he's managed to win a couple of, I suppose, we're talking about divisional sides and whatever. It's great that he's got to play in the Cork Senior Championship with O'Kelly, I suppose, as well, in a way. It's not so great potentially when they dominate for a couple of years. But and then he can obviously go back and play. He can obviously go back and play junior. It might be intermediate now with St. Edith's, but he's definitely another standout.
So does that almost take both Harnedy and Clifford out of the conversation because they have an outlet to play senior? It's quite different to what we're talking about in other situations where junior is the only club that they have and they don't move away. And I'm just wondering, so there are some clubs that obviously had a group of brothers, and the ones that come to mind are Caltra getting to an All-Ireland final against San Gaeltacht, the O'Sheas, but maybe they'll drop down the tiers after that particular generation is there. Actually, John Crawford here, did Brendan Cummins ever play senior? In hurling, he wouldn't. Well, depending on what way, because before it was almost impossible not to play senior hurling. I'm not sure what way it worked out with Ballybay and Grange back in the day, but he certainly played senior football.
and he's hanging on, and he's been open enough about saying it, that he's hanging on to try and play adult hurling with his own young fella, who I think was on the Tony Forrest and Tipperary this year. So he's a couple more years to wait, at least 3, probably 4 actually, more than likely. And just a quick one in there from Joe Butler, regular viewer. Joe, thanks a million for this. He says, Wiki says that Newtown Butler First Fermanagh is one of the oldest Fermanagh clubs. The name was suggested by Michael Cusack, apparently. First Fermanagh. So it's hardly like the first Fermanagh club ever, and like maybe that's why it was First Fermanagh. I don't know. It kind of just says there it was one of the first, but it's definitely interesting. I don't think it's fair to put to not have Clifford and Harnedy in the conversation, because it's not their fault, shall we say, that Cork and Kerry operate a divisional system. Doesn't like they're not going to transfer away from their clubs or anything like that. They're still with their club. They're just taking an opportunity that someone maybe like Gerard Hegarty doesn't have a chance to do, you know.
JJ Delaney with Fenians. Now, I'm not saying they're absolutely tiny club, but they've generally been operating in the lower tiers, and you know his famous record of winning so many relegation finals over the year as well. So he could be an option. Yeah, keep the comments coming in.
Now, the Fenians is not a small club, and I know. But before,
operating.
Yeah, but before our pay grade, they've a multitude of all stars even before JJ. But yeah, it's not. It wouldn't be a small club, but it would be. They'd maybe be down to. They were senior. He heard senior for a good while. He heard senior for a good while with Fenians. Definitely 08, 09 even would have been senior. It's only kind of in recent years that they're probably really struggling, and he has that enviable or unenviable relegation final win record.
Okay, so the Leinster Club semi-finals are on this weekend. Some big ones here, because they know that they're going to get to play at Croke Park again if they do manage to get through. So Kilmacud will meet Naas. That's a battle of the super clubs, and of course they had a great match last year. Ratoath are against Road of Offaly. The Downs of Westmeath will meet St. Mary's RD, their Louth club, and then Palatine of Carlow will meet Port Arlington. And Port Arlington were quite impressive for long spells last year before they faded away at Croke Park.
Yeah, four interesting games. I was chatting to Darragh McConnon of St. Mary's RD after their win over Colmcille the last day. He hit 2-1 that day. It was kind of the difference. And, you know, for a club like that who hadn't won a Louth title in the guts of about 20 years, I think, the carrot of playing in Croke Park is huge. Like, he obviously was involved with Louth this year. It was his first year on the senior squad. But the chance to play there, and listen, there's a kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, there's not going to be 40,000 there, okay? There might only be 6,000 or 7,000. But the notion of, you know, and I was chatting to their manager even after, and the notion of getting in a bus, going to Croke Park, been in the dressing rooms together, been in the warm-up area together, going out in the pitch together, playing a game there, like that carrot is absolutely monstrous for particularly clubs that haven't had a lot of success. For Crokes, I'm sure it's something they're not even thinking about, or maybe they're thinking about it in the sense of, if we can get to Croke Park, we're going to be really, really hard beaten. We're going to be even harder to beat in Croke Park than somewhere else. But for a Palatine, who are managed now by Pat O'Flynn, and for an RD, even for a Road, or you know, the highest club in terms of county titles in Offaly, they've never played in Croke Park. Like, that would be huge for them. So massive carrot for the 8 teams that are involved here. Huge incentive.
Yeah, I'm looking at the route that Naas had last year. They beat Tullamore 2-11 to 3-7. Was that the game with the late goal from Dara Kerwin?
Yeah, they were blessed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then they gathered a bit of momentum. First off, beating Blessington 4-11 to 1-7. Then they beat Shelmaliers. Shelmaliers had started that game well at Croke Park, but Naas kind of took it over.
Went extra time, I think, yeah, didn't it?
It did, didn't it? Yeah. Before ultimately losing to Crokes. They just kind of ran out of steam that day against Crokes, which also happened to Port Arlington. So Port Arlington beat Lomans. Then they came along and played Crokes, and it was 12 points to 111. And I think it was the same job for them, that they'd kind of ran out of steam just a little bit. Are Port Arlington a bit of a dark horse, or is it a bit too obvious to even call them a dark horse?
No, it probably is a bit too obvious. They're 3-in-a-row champions in Laois. I said they threw it down to the Crokes for long stages of that game last year. So again, they'll be another side. They're a very fit, kind of mobile side, play kind of free-flowing football. They'll enjoy getting back into Croke Park again. Same as I'd imagine Naas would too. And Naas, I'm sure, would love a shot at redemption potentially at Crokes down the line. It's very, like, when you're looking down through it, Crokes, and like, it's a very difficult task for Naas going into play Crokes in a quarter final in Leinster. But like, maybe if they're going to beat them, this is the stage that somebody's going to beat them. Maybe this is potentially the stage that they can. Still fancy Crokes to come through that. Ratode against Road. Ratode obviously won their county final by a point. Road won theirs by a point as well, and they beat Tullamore. I find that game really, really hard to call. Ratode won 2 or 3 weeks ago. Road are off about 6 weeks. I actually think St. Mary's RD have a right shot against the Downs. The Downs will probably be favourite in that game. St. Mary's had a load of injuries against Columkill. 4 or 5 starters from the county final replay against Newtown Blues that didn't start that day. Probably going to have a decent handful of them back. I think potentially they could win that one. Palatine against Port Harrington. Palatine were very good against St. Pat's in that Saturday night game a couple of weeks ago, but very hard to see past Port Harrington there. Road and Ratode, I don't know how to call that. I'd probably just about favour Ratode, but again, very, very difficult game to call. And the pressure and the incentive of playing in Croke Park again, I think I'd love to see Road play in Croke Park. They deserve to for what they've done now through the years.
Yeah, when we talked to Davy Burke last year, who's now the new Roscommon manager, and he was talking about Naas, he said they're a super club in waiting, and Crokes are used to being called a super club as well. So it is kind of the battle of the super clubs here. And if Naas could make that breakthrough, and maybe it'll be a tough one to do, considering they lost by 14-7 last year. Both teams were without their main men that day. Obviously, Paul Mannion, he pulled up lane beforehand, and so did Dara Kerwin. So then the thing is, can you stop Shane Walsh? And do you reckon maybe Owen Doyle would be in on him?
Yeah, potentially. And even though, like, a lot of Owen Doyle's probably best football with Kildare, I would have said, was even playing a sweeper at times and playing as the extra man. But he obviously has done man marking duties before. Great to see him back fit. Having missed the whole year with Kildare. It's an
you just don't want Shane Walsh to be the player to beat you, so you can't not put someone who you really trust to go on it.
Yeah, if other lads hurt you, fair play. But like, if you put your best defender on him and he can evenly hold him to 2 or 3, or stop him from creating out the pitch like he's done in games as well, at least you've gone some way. It's up to other lads maybe then to fight tooth and nail with other fellas and try and win those battles. But Dara Kerwin, it's a funny one. Yeah, you're saying they were both missing their star men last year. Dara Kerwin is back, and I was thinking, oh, geez, it's a massive boost for Naas. And it is. They're taking you throwing Shane Walsh in on the other side. And it's just like, an unbelievable boost. It was interesting to see that he wasn't around for the All-Stars last weekend, even though he was nominated for Footballer of the Year, which was, I thought, was a peculiar one. But
Liam himself wasn't there either.
Yeah, no, he's down in New Zealand on work placement, I think. So that's probably a bit different. But there was probably only a certain window where he could get away or get a break, I'd say, and he potentially took it. And the All-Stars was an unfortunate consequence of that. But that's a belter of a game in the Leinster quarter final. It really, really is. Should be a cracking game, but still very hard to see past Crokes.
Yeah, definitely. And Richard Hogan is talking about the big players who were didn't leave their small clubs. Niall Walsh with Sleeve and Pat Hartley with Tullaher, and obviously Wally Walsh you could mention. But Pat Hartley used to train with us in Coola now and again, and a few times myself and Pat had a couple of good flaking matches, so he's well able to give it back. Derek Ling is another, although I think Emerald's Erlingford moved up to intermediate around that time too.
Yeah, Taggy Fogarty even would probably be another one there as well. And he
coached the St. Vincent's Camogie team to Dublin glory this year.
Didn't realise that. No. And it's funny because I think the best managers, don't just look at senior clubs. Obviously, they will scour down through intermediate, junior, and whatever it is to try and find somebody that could potentially be, a jewel in waiting or a diamond in the rough. And Kilkenny is definitely one of the best examples of that, I would say.
Yeah, okay, let's go through some of the other fixtures this weekend. The Leinster Intermediate Football quarterfinals, Mullinavat of Kilkenny against Shandonna of Westmeath. Can't but mention Mullina Vegas, can we?
No, we can't, in fairness. They had a very good win over Bracknell, who were the Senior B champions in Offaly. So, and I've been in around this stage before, and a lot of those guys would play, like we obviously associate Kilkenny with hurling and probably hurling alone at times, but a lot of those guys would have went to Good Counsel New Ross and would have played colleges football, colleges A football, and to a really, really good level. So yeah, ML89 just says there as well. Yeah, just I'm glad I saw this somewhere, but I wasn't 100% sure. So Shane Walsh and Joe Canning were at Galway, Chicago fundraiser in Chicago, so wasn't there. Joe flew in the morning of the quarter final v Sarsfields. So that's obviously why Shane Walsh was away. But yeah, Mulnavat are a good side. I think they contested an intermediate Leinster final a couple of years ago. Definitely were at the semi-final stage. And would have a couple of Fenleys playing that would be maybe more renowned for the small ball, would definitely be able to kick the big ball as well.
Yeah, I'm actually just checking the Leinster Intermediate Club Championship to see if they did feature in any finals recently, and no Kilkenny
must have been
team.
a semi-final because I interviewed Liam Fenley, and he had a couple of young fellas actually involved there with them. And sorry, Shane, I'm after being distracted here. Shane Power just says Nisha Waldron, our cowboy. I don't know how Nisha got all the underdog boys into the Mighty Ducks anyway, and they were all having a few babies the day after the underdogs game with their Mighty Ducks. I was going to say costumes with their Mighty Ducks jerseys on.
Yeah, St. Mogs will meet Éire Óg of Greystones. Dunshaughlin are against Ballyteague, and Cooley Kickham's will meet Naomh Barogue of Dublin. Then the Junior Football Championship quarterfinals in Leinster. Clonmore of Carlow will meet Strathna of Kildare. Ballycommon of Offaly against Multifarnham of Westmeath. Lara of Wicklow against Castletown of Meath, and Garristown of Dublin will meet St. Albans of Wexford. Then the Kerry Intermediate Football semi-finals are on. Legion against Anguailtocht, and Rathmore will meet Beaufort. There's actually plenty of big names there across those games.
There is, yeah. Obviously, you've a former footballer there in James O'Donoghue who threaded a couple of lovely passes through for David Clifford last weekend. He'll be leading the line for the Legion. And Paul Murphy probably be one of the star names where Rathmore against Beaufort. And then in the junior semi-finals, you have Listry against Ballymcgilligan, and David and Paddy Clifford's Fossa against Ardfort. And then we have the Limerick Senior Football final this weekend as well. It's gas. We're kind of nearly gone past the county final stage at this stage. So, but this is one of the rare ones that are on this weekend. It is Adair against Newcastle West. Newcastle West won 1-8-5 when they met in last year's final. Ian Corbett, who'd be centre back for Limerick, nominated for an All-Star in recent years as well. He'd be the main man for Newcastle West.
Does any club or county footballer have better ink than Ian Corbett?
He's fair ink. Ger Brown has fair ink as well now.
He does, and so does Mickey Burke, obviously.
Yeah, Mickey Burke does as well. I'd be more now. I would never get a tattoo because I'm too white. I don't know if that's racist.
Oh, I think you'd look gorgeous.
That's racist against myself or what, but I just think I'm too white to pull it off. But I'd be more of a subtle kind of variety if I was going to get something, whereas maybe some of those lads would be a bit more obvious, shall we say. I'd like to see what subtle ink is, something maybe on a calf that you can't see. Dan has a couple of lovely ones on his arms as well, maybe too.
There's that, look at that line that Ian Corbett has. So that'll tell you, that's a serious ink game now.
That is a serious ink game. I hadn't actually really noticed that too much, to be fair, and I don't know how I hadn't. The one in this quad is relatively new, I think.
That one, okay, yeah. And the one that Ger Brown, the Tipperary hurler, got this past year, so that's pretty serious stuff. So like you're saying, Adair, Newcastle West. So Adair won it in 17, 18 and 20, but Newcastle West obviously looking very good in the last while as well. Ladies football Munster final is on. Ballymacarbery will meet the Banner. Busy week for both sides, really, isn't it? Because obviously Banner in the hurling, Shane Meehan and co up against, who were Banner against again? Was it? They're against, who were they against?
While you're
Kilgarvan.
Kilgarvan, yeah. And obviously, the Nair won the Waterford Senior Football title last weekend and had a very good Monday club and potentially a Tuesday club and Wednesday club as well. So they're having a really good time of it across male and female codes there. So Ballymacarbery had been beaten by Mourneabbey, for the last good few years in Munster, and obviously had won All Irelands back in the day under Michael Ryan. And they'll be mad keen to get their hands back on a Munster title again and hopefully go on an All-Ireland run. Especially Kilkerran Clonberne won in Galway again this year. But if you look at it, St. Sylvester's dethroned Foxrock, Cabinteely. Who are the others? So somebody else big. Dunboyne were last year's Leinster champions, and they're out as well. So there's an opportunity there potentially for the Ballymac ladies to get back on top in Ireland again.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for more or less for the show this week. Don't forget now, we've got ourstore.ie is live, so there's any amount of potential Christmas presents you could buy there. There's all sorts of hoodies, hats, mugs, t-shirts, you name it, they're on ourstore.ie there. That's it from myself and Michael. We'll be back again on Monday reviewing all of the good stuff. Thanks very much, Mikey.
Cheers, Shano.